And hello, Nick Bendel. Welcome back to the weekly segment of the weekly news.
Thanks, Owen. It's
Thanks,
great
Owen.
to be here. I am in a different location today. Normally I'm in Sydney, but today I'm in Port Macquarie.
And have you seen any wildlife while you've been there?
Well, funny you should ask. I did see a couple of dolphins on my morning walk today.
Oh, nice. You must have been an early bird because it's still early at this point. So yes, well done on that. It's did you get to see the sunrise at the same time?
I did. I went for a walk at 5 a.m., walked for a couple of hours, and I saw them just before I got back to my hotel. It was very nice timing.
Nice. Port Macquarie is a nice spot in the world. So enjoy your stay, your working holiday.
It is a working holiday.
Yes. Um, Nick, what's been apart from enjoying Port Macquarie and the Dolphins? What have you been up to in the past week work-wise?
Well, for those who don't know, Owen, my business, Hunter and Scribe, we're a copywriting agency that writes content for property and finance professionals. And one of the things that Hunter and Scribe specialize in doing is writing media releases that generate media coverage for our clients. And since we last spoke, we helped a buyer's agent generate media coverage in the Daily Mail, Yahoo Finance, savings.com.au, InfoChoice, Australian Broker, Property Buzz, and a few other publications.
Oh, great. So you can make everyone famous as well.
Well, I like to be anonymous. I'm a very shy person, and I much prefer other people to be famous.
Very good, very good. It's I don't think of you as being that shy, Nick.
And what about you, Owen? Have you been up to anything? And has Leafield been up to anything since we last spoke?
Yes, something interesting in the past week. We were referred to an agency on Sydney's Upper North Shore to help them. They've got a small number of managements under 50, which is probably not ideal for being able to employ a property manager to look after just those number of properties. So they were referred to us to look at outsourcing all of those managements to us to on a 100% basis, so that we can look after it for them, all under their name as well. So that's not our usual model, but it's something that we can do for agencies that do want that to happen. So yeah, it's so that was an interesting project that will go on for another week or so before we are able to get that one going. So yeah.
Well, that white label service you mentioned, that is very interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm a real estate agent or maybe a buyer's agent or a mortgage broker, and I don't have a capacity to do property management myself, if I've understood correctly, I could potentially outsource that to you in Leafield, and I would still own the client, but you would basically be doing all the work in the background.
Yes, that's generally what we do in our business with our business partners. The only difference with this one is it's more of a true white labeling service, whereas normally it all needs to operate under our branding. But seeing that this business already has a number of managements, and and at some point in the future they'll probably want to take over the direct management of them, whereas most refer as business partners. That's not in their business plan to do long term. So yes, it's suited for them to be able to still have everything under their name and branding.
Well, makes sense, Owen. And are you ready for us to move into the first of three news stories today?
Yes, what's in the news, Nick? Tell me.
Well, our very first story, home building approvals fall 6% year on year. There's been a further decline in the number of new homes that are scheduled for construction, casting further doubt on the federal government's housing target. A total of 13,225 home building approvals were issued in January, according to the latest data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. That was 2.1% lower than the month before and 6.0% lower than the year before. Starting from July this year, the government is aiming to facilitate the building of 1.2 million new homes over 5 years. So if we extrapolate 13,225 approvals per month equals about 794,000 over 5 years, which is well below that 1.2 million mark. And bear in mind, a certain percentage of homes that have been approved never end up getting built. So the number would end up being even lower than that 794,000 that we're on track for. Owen, should we be concerned that home building approvals are both relatively low and falling?
Yes, absolutely. As we've spoken about many times before, it's yeah, we're not going to have any positive dent on the housing crisis for both affordability to buy as well as affordability to rent, unless we fix the supply issue. And yeah, the government has been pushing this agenda of theirs to be able to build 1.2 million new homes over the next 5 years. Unless they plan to build 1 million in the fifth year, I don't think we'll get anywhere close to it. It's they're not really dealing with the issue. They just put this band-aid solution on, and which is, I mean, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything to fix it. It's it's as bad as the potential for a climate crisis, but they seem to be more preoccupied with trying to fix that when people aren't going to have anywhere to live. And it's, even though the climate crisis is an important one for all of humanity, if people don't have anywhere to live, the last thing they're going to be worried about is trying to fix the climate.
Well, it's interesting because one thing we've discussed in previous episodes, if there is a shortage of housing and more people have to rent, and if there's a shortage of rental stock, that's going to push up rents. And if rent has become a growing share of the population, and if it's harder and harder for them to afford to pay their rent, that's going to have social and political consequences.
Yeah. So it's the number one thing they can do is to be able to fix the supply issue and cut the red tape, get things approved, and it's ridiculous. Their priorities. It's like, and this is both sides of politics. That both have made the situation worse. So and with the huge influx of population, which they probably did for a couple of reasons, but one reason was to be able to boost the economy up, which it did. But we've got nowhere to live. There's
You,
people with, and I say that with there's not enough supply of properties where people need to live right now. If people weren't tied to a specific geographic area, yes, they could find properties to live in that would be a lot easier. But quite often for work reasons, people need to live in a particular area.
you mentioned, Owen, that the government should be looking to reduce red tape, which I suppose would not only speed up the process for people who do apply to build a home, but it would probably also encourage more people to apply in the first place. Is there anything else that government can do to stimulate more home building activity?
There's so many things they could do in terms of, I mean, the big one is getting approvals through easier. That they could guarantee financing for the construction, but they'd also want to make sure that they're locking in building prices at the same time, so that doesn't become a bigger cost. One of the big things that stop developers from getting through is being able to get the finance. Rather than necessarily putting in equity positions with the home equity scheme, I think it's called, for first home buyers. And rather than doing something like that, it's take an equity position in developments to get them pushed through. Which will put more supply into the market, which will then make it easier for people to buy. It's rather than trying to do it on the retail point, which yes buys votes because people go, oh, the government's helped me do this, but it doesn't fix the underlying problem. It's still just band-aids.
Well, our second story today, Owen, the economy grew just 0.2% in the December 2023 quarter. Economic growth has fallen for the fourth consecutive quarter, a logical consequence of the Reserve Bank's campaign to reduce inflation by raising interest rates to slow the economy. The latest data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that GDP grew 0.8% in the December 2022 quarter, then 0.6% in the March 23 quarter, and 0.5% in the June 23 quarter, and 0.3% in the September 23 quarter, and then 0.2% in the December 2023 quarter. The Reserve Bank has been trying to slow the economy just enough to tame inflation, but not so much that it triggers a recession. If the economy keeps slowing, the Reserve Bank may decide its economic tightening has gone too far and start thinking about cutting interest rates. First things first, Owen, should we be concerned that the economy is slowing?
No, because that's what was causing the inflation issue to begin with, and it just shows that the raising of the interest rates has worked. Whether they raise them too much and too quickly is another thing. And I forgot my crystal ball this morning, so we'll just have to wait and see. So we shouldn't be concerned.
I like your point about the trade-offs involved. If we want to reduce inflation, we need to slow the economy, which means higher unemployment and lower profits for businesses. Conversely, if we want to maximize economic growth and maximize employment, well, we're going to have inflation. There are trade-offs. There's no free lunch. We have to pick one or the other. And we've decided, rightly or wrongly, that we're going to prioritize getting rid of inflation. As a result, the economy is slowing. Interestingly, Owen, while we're not in a technical recession because the economy has kept growing, we are actually in a per capita recession. And that's because for 3 consecutive quarters, our population has grown faster than our economy, which means output per person has gone backwards for 3 consecutive quarters. So I'm wondering, does that mean the economy is weaker than the headline data would suggest?
Well, it's just because it's a per capita recession, and I've had some other people bring this up with me as well. So I'm glad you have as well, so we can answer it. Per capita recession, yeah, great. You can work that you can calculate that coming down to each individual, but it's still technically not a recession because we've had other inputs from larger immigration and population growth to be able to offset it. So the raising of the interest rates has done its job to slow the economy and to stop people spending as much and to try and help bring prices down, or to at least stop them increasing as quickly. And that's done its job. But by the increase of immigration, that has kept the economy buoyant enough. So if we hadn't have got that increase in immigration, we may not have had and seen the economy still going as strong as it was, then we may not have had interest rates go up as much. So it's a trade-off. So when we look at, so is the economy weaker than the headline? So No, the economy is exactly what they're in the position that the headline figures are saying it's in. So it's you've got the consequence of the further immigration having more than likely pushed the economy further, so interest rates had to go further. If we hadn't have had the huge influx of immigration, then maybe our interest rates might not have been as high as they are now. And and we wouldn't have a housing crisis that is as bad as it is now. So I think what we need to look at is why did we have such a huge influx in immigration?
Well, okay, so the economy is what the economy is, for better or worse.
Yep.
We've had 4 consecutive quarters of slowing growth. The most recent quarter, the economy grew just 0.2%, which is very, very slow growth. Given this economic weakness, do you think it's likely the Reserve Bank will start cutting interest rates at some point this year?
Yeah, well, everyone's saying sort of September, October. With these figures, I think it might be. I mean, the issue between now and September is we've got a cut in income tax rates happening 1st of July. So that could have a stimulus to the economy to offset any of this slowdown. So the Reserve Bank might be holding off to make any decision till after that. But in the meantime, could we end up having a dipping into negative growth for at least one quarter? And we won't know that until we see the figures come out.
I
So
will. Yeah, I'll be very curious to see in 3 months' time what our next GDP reading is, and of course that will be for the March quarter.
yes, it's. I still think they overcooked it by 1 or 2 rate rises, and or they could have gone harder and faster in the beginning, and then gone a lot slower to get up to this point, if it was still required. And so we'll see. But the next 6 months is going to be interesting. If we do go into like again, it's not like someone's going to flick a switch and suddenly things happen just because we're in a technical recession. And apart from the COVID-induced recession, we haven't had a proper recession for a very long time. So it's not as long as people aren't losing their jobs in droves, and large corporates aren't laying off, and small businesses aren't laying off, where people are having to start selling their houses. There's no inclination at all of that happening. So yes, a slowing down and a soft landing, whether we dip into a technical recession or not, or even just one quarter of negative growth, then that's that's livable.
Our final story today, Owen. Yes, stamp duty costs have increased. In the mid-1980s, the average buyer in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide needed to work for only about 1 month to afford to pay stamp duty, according to joint research by the E61 Institute and PropTrack, and that's based on comparing the average post-tax income with the median price property. But whereas it took about 1 month to save stamp duty costs in the 1980s, today it takes about 6 months in Sydney, 6 months in Melbourne, 5 months in Adelaide, 4 months in Brisbane. There are 2 reasons why stamp duty has become more expensive. First, property prices have grown faster than incomes. And second, property prices have grown faster than the stamp duty price brackets, resulting in bracket creep. Are you first, Owen, are you surprised that stamp duty has been allowed to grow by so much?
Am I surprised that they've allowed it? The surprised that the state governments have allowed extra tax to come in from property? No, not at all, Nick. um, it's but is it a big problem? Yes, it's a huge problem. And now we've got state governments who are addicted to it, um, and they can't live without it, and because it brings in huge amounts. But it's a really bad tax. It's such a bad tax. It has such negative consequences on the property market, and it's the one thing that can um, that can control different price brackets within the property market. So there needs to be reform of stamp duty. I think I've spoken about it before, where the best thing that could happen is have it converted into a land tax situation, um, with different brackets for lower price properties, so that the median price property, and have it structured so that it automatically changes with property prices, and so that the median price always has the median tax amount, and it's yeah, it has such positive consequences by turning it into a ongoing land tax issue. Now, there are so many ways it can be manipulated in a constructive way to allow people to be able to downsize. So you've got a lot of retirees living in huge houses worth a lot of money where they don't have the income to upkeep them. But then you've got couples with families with huge incomes but not enough savings to be able to get into a larger house, because the stock isn't being sold, and they have to have this huge amount of stamp duty up front to be able to get into a property like that. So there's so many ways it could make the property market a lot more fluid.
Well, you've mentioned a few things: stamp duty, land tax, the property market, affordability. I You reminded me of an idea I heard maybe 7 years ago that's always remained in my mind, that seems kind of wacky, but is, I suppose, a perfect market-oriented policy. I just want to run this by you. It's more of a thought
Yeah,
exercise
sure.
because it's probably not practical. So imagine, so the idea is we get rid of stamp duty, we just have a land tax,
Mm.
and everyone gets to choose their own value for their property. So let's say you value your property at $1 million, well, you pay land tax based on $1 million valuation. Or if you say, you know what, I don't want to pay that much tax, I'm going to value my property at 600 grand. Well, now you only have to pay land tax based on 600 grand. However, and here's the catch, whatever you value your property at, anyone is allowed to buy your property for that price. So if you say, I'm only going to value it at 600, great, I can come in and buy it for 600. Now, if you say, I want to stop Nick buying my property for 600, I'm going to value it at $2 million. There's no way he'll buy it for 2 million. Fine. But now you have to pay land tax based at $2 million. So the idea is this is the market deciding what the valuation is, not governments.
Okay. And how often does the property owner get to review their self-assessed value?
That I don't know. Now, of course, this policy would never ever, or this idea would never ever become official policy. But at a theoretical level, I'm wondering, what do you think of it?
um, yes, I can see um, the sense of coming up with that, and how it would. But of course, someone who's would they be tied into selling at that price? Like, can they take a lower price?
If you value your home at $1 million, so you only have to pay land tax of $1 million, you are forced to sell if someone offers you that amount of money.
Yeah, if you want to sell, if you put it on the market for sale.
No.
No?
If you value your home at $1 million, so you only have to pay land tax of $1 million, if I come up to you and I say, Owen, I've got $1 million, you have to sell to me.
All right. Yeah,
And
well, I mean, yeah, that's that. I wouldn't be happy with that situation.
okay,
And I
well,
don't think that would fly.
the way to avoid me coming up to you and buying your home for $1 million is you say, well, I'm going to value it then at $2 million, Nick. Get stuffed. Okay, but now you have to pay land tax on $2 million rather than $1 million. So it forces you, the owner, to put a proper value on that property. Now, presumably, if I came up to you and I offered you $100 million for the property, presumably you would sell. But in this thought experiment at $1 million, you wouldn't want to sell. So then it seems like $1 million valuation is not a fair valuation on which to be assessed. And you would then have to raise it to whatever valuation you were willing for someone to come and take that property off you. That way you're fine if someone does come and take the property off you. But in the meantime, you have to pay land tax at that value. This is the idea. It would never become official policy, but it is an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting thought exercise but there'll always be the person who cries poor because they didn't know and then they were ripped off. And how did the government allow this to happen? Yeah, bit like borrowers who push banks to lend them too much money, and then cry poor. And it's so yes, it wouldn't work in theory, but it would be a good theoretical exercise. Sorry, it wouldn't work in practice, but it's an interesting theoretical exercise. It's yes, having it would still have to be an independent valuer that would determine the value, and that's because what if your circumstances didn't allow you to sell, or you didn't want to sell for whatever reason. And yes, I know the point of the exercise is to value the property at that point, but then what if your circumstances changed and you have to sell? Do you have to sell at that price? Can you lower your price if you have to sell for some reason? Yeah, interesting concept there.
We've given people a lot to think about over the next week.
Yes, thanks, Nick. It's if you have any questions or comments about Nick's idea about being able to value your own property but then pay tax based on that, please let us know. It'd be interesting to see. And also your thoughts about stamp duty versus land tax ongoing as well. It's something that I'm passionate about because I can see the positives for everyone in the market of how it would help. And but no government has been game enough except for the previous New South Wales Liberal government, who had started the process of trying it out, but no one else has been game to. I think they're all addicted to the stamp duty revenue. So interesting. All right. Thanks, Nick. Next week, we got another episode of the Weekly News. Looking forward to it, and still from Port Macquarie.
Still from Port Macquarie. Looking forward to it.
All right. See you then, Nick.